Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Django High School, we would like to welcome every single one of you to be here with us today at the Tang Prize Youth Symposium. The Tang Prize was founded by Dr. Samuel Ying in hopes of encouraging individuals across the globe to chart the middle path towards sustainable development. Through recognizing groundbreaking achievements in areas such as sustainable development, sinology, biopharmaceutical science, and rule of law, the Tang Prize has greatly contributed to the pursuit of cultural elements and the progress of change. This year, we are honored to invite Professor Mary Robinson with us today. She is the Tang Prize laureate in rule of law, a former president and advocate of human rights. She has spent over 6 decades standing up for the rights of the vulnerable and unprivileged. From a small town on Ireland's coast to the world stage, Professor Robinson has always championed for the voiceless. When Somalia suffered from famine in 1992, she was the first foreign head of state to visit. When Rwanda suffered from genocide in 1994, she was also the first to visit. And it was by virtue of her selflessness that the realization of rights and justice of the disadvantaged was made possible. Through demonstrating an effective combination of legal acumen and practical solutions, she has greatly strengthened the rule of law. Now, let's give her and her husband, Mr. Nicholas Robinson, a warm applause. Today, we also have several esteemed guests with us. First of all, I'd like to introduce the director of the Tang Prize Foundation, Mrs. Hu Ying. The director of the Department for Youth, Mr. Ying Wei. The section chief of the Department of Education, Mr. Huang Qiaowei. Principal of Zhonglun High School, Mr. Wu Mingxiang. And of course, our very own principal of Django High School, Mr. Zhuang Zhijun. Today, we also have students from many schools here with us today. So when I say your school, please wave your hands. First of all, we have students from Django High School. Next, we have students from Taipei First Girls High School. We also have students from Zhonglun High School. Also, there are students from Nangang High School. Next, we have students from Wanfang High School. And we also have students from Shilin Commercial and Industrial Vocational High School. And finally, we have students from Mandarin Experimental Elementary School. Thank you all for being here today. Now, we have a video about Professor Mary Robinson. Let's watch the video and get to know more about her and her amazing journey.
On December 3, 1990, Ireland saw its first female president take office. To the still deeply Catholic nation, it was an earth-moving historical moment. Mary Robinson was born in County Mayo, Ireland, to 2 doctors, the only daughter among 4 brothers. Her parents would tell young Mary that she'd have the same opportunities as her brothers, but the reality was much different.
And there were so many discriminations. So my parents were saying one thing, and our society was saying another. And I think that gave me a sense, I'm going to try and make it the way my parents wanted to be.
She strove for social change through legal means. At 25 years old, she became a senator, putting forward several bills on human rights. As a lawyer, she helped secure women's right to sit on juries. Arguing cases before the European Court of Human Rights, she pushed the Irish government on reform in divorce and homosexuality.
I think she returned to the law a real sense of its efficacy and of its ability to defend people. She returned a new dignity to the law in this country.
Her becoming president transformed the role from ceremonial to impactful. She spoke up for the marginalized in her country and globally.
Mary Robinson transformed the role of the president in Irish political life, became a conscience of a nation, a place that people could look to and find their values reflected.
She later was invited to be UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, visiting various countries with human rights issues. As UN Special Envoy on Climate Change, she witnessed the injustices climate change inflicts on the vulnerable and started a foundation for climate justice. She now sits on the Elders as its chair and founding member in her ongoing fight for human rights.
It's extremely important to give people hope, to have the positive narrative, to make it happen, and it will happen.
Just like the title of her autobiography, Mary Robinson believes that everybody matters, and law is the foundation on which she built up that value.
After watching this video, I'm sure you all have a better understanding of our Tang Prize laureate, Professor Mary Robinson. Now, let us welcome the representative of Tang Prize Foundation, Director Hu Yingying, to say a few words.
Principal Zhang, Professor Robinson, 以及各位贵宾，早安！非常荣幸能够来到建中，与各位同学共同来出席这个难得的活动。今天我们邀请到唐奖当届的法治奖得主Mary Robinson 教授，来共同探讨气候正义与永续发展。Robinson 教授在1997年卸任爱尔兰总统后，陆续担任了联合国的各项职务，包括联合国人权事务高级专员、联合国非洲大湖区事务特使、联合国气候变迁特使以及联合国圣婴现象及气候特使。那就像刚刚在各位同学在影片中所看到的，他现在是元老会 The Elders 的创始成员以及主席。在唐奖的官网中，关于他的贡献这样子叙述着，他的这些职务全部都朝向同一个目标来努力，为世界中声量最为微弱的族群捍卫他们的权利与正义。那正是 Robinson 教授的精神的典范，让我们明白，正义是良心，改革是行动，良心需要加上行动，才能实现正义。我们现在的世界需要采取行动，确保所有的人都能够享有永续且公平的未来。今天的对话 ，Robinson 教授会聆听各位同学的声音。你们是主宰未来的青年世代，未来的栋梁，是推动改变的关键力量。这也是今天唐奖教育基金会与建国中学合作青年对谈的初衷，以我们基金会应尽的一份心力。谢谢大家。
Thank you, Director Hu. Please be seated. Next, let us welcome the Director of the Department for Youth, Mr. Ying Wei, to say a few words.
Good morning, Professor Mary Robinson, Mr. Robinson. 我们胡英处长代表唐奖基金会，我们建中的这个庄校长，我们教育局的我们的黄科长，中仑高中的我们的校长，还有我们现场的各位与会的嘉宾，各位年轻的朋友，各位高中的同学们，大家早安，大家好。My name is Wei Yin. I served I serve as the Commissioner for Youth at Taipei City Government. And I can't tell you how privileged I feel today to be here to simply express our gratitude to Professor Mary Robinson for your dedication and contribution on not only gender equality, human rights, but also global climate justice, and your inspiration for the youngsters in Ireland and here in Taiwan and globally. As a very new department, we just set up this department this year, and we set up a Mayor's Youth Council this year as well. We're trying very hard to kind of echo your achievement and the emphasis you've been putting on throughout your career, which is global climate justice and also sustainability and also the rule of law. So again, I'm just here to say a thank you towards you and to the Tang Prize Foundation and also to Jianguo Senior High School for making all this possible. And I personally very much look forward to a very productive and inspirational dialogue that's going to happen here. Thank you again very much. 也谢谢我们所有与会的所有同学，请尽情享受这个可以跟大师对谈的机会。我们台北市青年局今年才刚成立，希望在接下来的日子里也能够像今天的这样一个主题，以世代正义为题，跟各位在这条路上一起同行，一起努力。谢谢大家 ，Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ying. Please be seated. Now, let us welcome our principal, Mr. Zhuang Zhijun, to give us his welcome remarks.
Mary Robinson 女士，唐奖基金会的各位贵宾，还有我们青年局、教育局的各位长官，还有我们在座的吴校长，还有各位师长跟各位同学，大家早安。我们这样感觉没有年轻人的活力，好，大家早安。好，首先要谢谢大家拨空来参加我们今年唐奖跟青年对谈的这个活动。那我们也非常荣幸能够透过唐奖，邀请到唐奖法治类的今年2024的得奖人 Mary Robinson 女士来跟大家分享她过去的经验跟见解。Mary Robinson 女士在过去曾经在1990年到1997年担任爱尔兰的总统，1997年到2002年在联合国担任人权事务高级的专员，2003年到2009年担任世界女性领袖协会的主席，这也是我们今天特别邀请几所女校一起来出席。那2014年到2015年，她担任联合国的气候变迁的特使。好，2016年开始还担任了联合国声音现象及气候特使。好，那他在不同的职务当中，面对不同的议题，为最弱势的族群来发声，展现这个无畏的精神，而且从不停歇。那各位知道，他到现在已经80岁了哈。那这个议题从他过去1990年到现在，长达30年的时间。他成为诉讼的律师跟立法者，他推动了性别平权的相关的人权法案。那身为国家元首，刚刚在影片当中大家也看到他转换的角色，关注全球一些重要的事件，包含索马利亚的饥荒，还有卢安达的种族灭绝事件。我们今天非常高兴能够得到唐奖基金会的协助，让我们有机会可以邀请 Mary Robinson 女士来到建中，跟来自各高中的同学们来分享她的生涯阅历。那也希望今天的对谈能够成为大家在学习跟生涯中发展的指引。那建中一直希望我们的同学能够勇于迎接世界的挑战，展现我们对社会的关怀。好，那今天我想 Mary Robinson 女士她的现身跟分享会带给我们同学们很多的宝贵的启发。那我们也特别准备了一份纪念品，包含我们红楼的油画。那作为感谢 Mary Robinson 女士到建中来，那 另外一幅油画，我们刚刚在先前已经先请他签名的，好，未来会留在建中。那包含先前的马总统、赖总统等等，好，都有签名的油画留在建中。那我们希望有更多影响大家、有启发性的人士到建中来，我们来做一些纪念，也对同学们的未来的30年可以带来深远的影响。再一次代表学校感谢今天这场意义非凡的交流跟对谈，谢谢大家。
Thank you, Principal Zhuang. Now, Jengo High School has prepared 2 special presents for Professor Mary Robinson. Professor Robinson, would you please join us on the stage? The first present we have prepared is a CK High School couch cushion. Next, we have also prepared a painting of Jengo High School's Red Chamber. It is the most historic building in our school. Thank you, Professor Robinson and Principal Zhuang. Professor Robinson, please be seated in the sofa. Now is the time we've all been waiting for, the Q&A session. For our host, we have invited Mr. Xu Zhiliang, our beloved English teacher. We've also invited student representatives from different schools. First, we have Huang Haochen, Ricky, Ma Chongwei, Chen Wei from Jianguo High School. Next, we have Ling Liya, Lydia, from Taipei First Girls High School. We also have Shen Ziyuan, Yuan, from Zhongshan Girls High School. Mr. Xu, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Yuan. Good morning, everyone. For the rest of our time, we'll be engaging in a very intellectual and in-depth discussion conversation with Dr. Mary Robinson. It has had a transformative effect on Ireland. As we know, she was the first Irish president. During her tenure from 1990 to 1997, that period was marked by her relentless commitment to promoting human rights, peace building, and social inclusiveness. She also reshaped the presidency to be more representative and address a lot of critical social issues with empathy and courage. Just like mentioned before, Dr. Robinson has been served as the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, and she is continuing to be a driving force for climate justice. She also advocates for a lot of solutions that prioritize the vulnerable community, especially those countries in Africa, where the impacts of climate change are the most severe. Moreover, Dr. Robinson has been constantly be seen as a beacon of gender equality because she emphasized the importance of empowering women in diverse contexts, environmentally issues included. She believes that women's participation and leadership are crucial for effective climate actions and social equity. All in all, in light of all these achievements, our focus today will center around all the significant contributions. We will just focus on 4 main sessions with 2 students assigned to raise questions for each part. And the question will be involved around 4 sessions. The first one will be like Dr. Robinson's political experiences. That will be followed by any challenges or any obstacle that she encountered during her presidency. And we will talk about environmental sustainability. How can we strike a balance between economic growth and environmental sustainability? And the last one, we hope that Dr. Mary Robinson can give us some advice to our younger generation. Okay, without much ado, let's get started on our first session. And our first student, Ricky, has got his question ready. Ricky, here we go.
Thank you, Mr. Shi. Greetings, Dr. Robinson. I'm honored to be the first speaker of the symposium. For the first question, I would like to start with a rather broad topic. Throughout your career, you have achieved numerous milestones in domains including gender equality, poverty alleviation, climate justice, and human rights. Could you describe the leadership characteristics you consider essential in achieving those goals? And how have your qualities you possess assisted you in your political journey? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, Ricky. It's a very interesting question about leadership. I think a lot sometimes about the fact that I was lucky to get elected very early to the Parliament in Ireland. And the only reason that I had the courage to stand for the Parliament was that I had the experience of studying law in the Harvard Law School. So I was there from 1967 to 1968. Imagine how long ago that is. Imagine, 1967 to 1968. But think of what was happening in the United States. Young Americans were trying to avoid the Vietnam War, and Martin Luther King was assassinated in April, and just after I graduated, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. But what I remembered and what I brought back to Ireland was that my young friends were going to make a difference. They were going to go into civil rights in the south of the United States, poverty programs. They were going to give leadership. And this fascinated me because in the Ireland I had grown up in, young people waited, and they waited. And they became 20, 30, and they still waited to take any leadership. So the year after I came back in 1969, there was this election to the Senate, and we have 6 seats for university representatives, and they were all traditionally elderly male professors. So I queried, why? And my friend said, well, you know, if you feel like that, why don't you challenge? Why don't you run? And I went forward because I had that kind of sense of young people can lead. I would not have had that if I had not gone to Harvard. It gave me, I want to make a joke, which I hope you understand, it gave me what my future husband, Nick, called my Harvard humility. He meant the opposite, not humility, the kind of courage to push yourself forward. So when I think about leadership, I think about how lucky I was to get support very early from a lot of people much older than me to get a seat in Parliament at the age of 25. And then I learned that you should bring people with you. And of course, if you are elected to public service, you are elected to serve. That's very important, to serve the people that elected you. And even now, when I'm not elected, I see my leadership as serving those who don't have a voice, those who need, you know, to be spoken for. So I hope that explains. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Robinson, for your valuable insight into the leadership quality. I think your dedication to serving people is very impressive, and the influence of your studying abroad has a great impact on your life. Thank you so much. And now we are moving on to our next question. We still have another question, Lydia. She has another question about your political experiences. Lydia, here you go.
Thank you, Teacher Shi. Greetings, Dr. Robinson. Noting that you're elected as the Senator of the Irish Senate at the age of 25, as a young woman in a predominantly male and older institution, what challenges did you face in terms of gender equality and being given different treatment? And how do you navigate these challenges during your early political career?
Thank you, Lydia, for that question. I can understand why you ask as a young woman, a young student. You know, so I was elected, and I went along to take my seat in the Senate. And I met, and there were only 6 women of the 60 members of the Senate at that time, 6 out of 60. And I met one of them, an older woman, when I was signing in, before actually the Parliament, the Senate, had convened. And she said to me, you know, women wear hats in the Senate. And I looked at her, I didn't like wearing hats. And I said, oh. So I put on a small beret on the first day, and I was photographed. And I hated it, because it wasn't true. It was a tradition. Because we were a very conservative Catholic country, women in the Parliament would automatically feel they had to wear hats. No reason except custom. So the second day, I threw away the hat. No more hats. And that was one time when I felt I had to, I felt that I had been very stupid to listen to this, because there was nothing in the rules of the Senate that said that women should wear hats. And then later, I had another experience, not in Ireland, but in Europe. I was on a committee that was discussing enlarging the European Union to admit new countries, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and Denmark. Also Norway, but Norway said no, so 3 countries. And I was the only woman on this commission, and we were going to be going over and back to Brussels. It was a very intensive discussion, and they wanted to pay us our expenses. We didn't get a fee, we got expenses. So they came round and they said, please open a bank account. We give you a choice of bank. And then they came to me and said, oh, you are a married woman. Oh, we need the written permission of your husband. So I went back, and of course my husband said, oh, I'd love to give you written permission. I said, no, I don't want your written permission. So in the end, I got the bank account not as Mrs. Robinson, but as Ms. Robinson, which didn't say whether I was married or not. So they were kind of some of the strange things of being a woman in public life, because there were not enough of us. But much more important, I think, was identifying with what needed to change. And that was why the first thing that I wanted to change as an elected senator was to legalize family planning, reproductive health in Ireland, because women were having too many babies without any choice about the matter. And it was a very Catholic-dominated country, and we needed to have women freer to make their own choice. What I did not realize was how unpopular this would make me. It made me very, very unpopular for a while, because I was challenging the religious, the conservative mood in Ireland. And so I got hate letters. There was no social media. That did not exist in 1969, 1970, 1971, when I was starting my life in the Senate. But hate letters are very painful. And I found it quite disturbing. And in the end, I had married Nick. We had been students together, and we had married in December 1990. And in early 1991, when the pressure became very bad, he burnt the letters. We decided to burn them. Now, of course, we regret, because this would have been good evidence of the mood of the time, good historical evidence. And so I found it important to realize, if you really believe in something, don't worry about whether you're popular. Go ahead. Believe in what you're doing. Have faith in that you're doing the right thing. And so that carried me forward. And then, just briefly, when I was elected president, my whole attitude was, I'm going to do a better job precisely because I am a woman. I know that. I'm going to actually do a better job and be a better president as a woman. And that was how I ended up. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Mary Robinson. This is very touching, because I believe that you encountered a lot of bias when you were young, and you dared to challenge the religion, the social norms at that time. But I believe that you must be a woman of a very strong mind and a strong will. Maybe you don't care about. I'm just curious about how you fight off all of those backlash, because you say you were very unpopular at that time. So how can you deal with that kind of emotional, like, blackmail or negative impacts in your life? Yeah.
I think I realized that although initially when I was elected, because I was young and I was a woman, I was kind of a celebrity and popular. But when I introduced this legislation, this draft bill on family planning, suddenly I was very unpopular with a whole section, not necessarily with young people, but certainly with people who were in control of the country. And I just realized, you know, you need to have the courage to continue if you know you are right. And the problem in Ireland was that married women could not get any access to the contraceptive pill unless they had the written permission of their doctor that they had cycle regulation problems. And we used to actually joke in Ireland that because of our Irish weather, many women had cycle regulation problems. In other words, people were trying to get around the law because it was stupid, and it was preventing women from being able to decide on the number of children, decide, etc., and on their own health. And so I knew I was doing the right thing, but and that carried me, I think. And I must say, later when I had tough decisions to make, it was never as hard. Because the first time I had managed to break through and keep going. And afterwards, even though I got criticism of some other decisions later, it was never as, you know, it was never as much of a problem. I think it's almost as if you get tougher when you have decided to be brave and courageous. Then later on, it's easier to be courageous.
Thank you so much for your courage. You survive, I have to say, you survive. Yeah, so courage is very important when we want to do some changes. I think we will keep discussing this issue around the politics and the Catholicism later, because we have a question about this one. We'll talk later in detail, yeah. Maybe now we can move on to another session. I think most of the audience here, we are intrigued by your experiences during your presidency, because you were the first female in your country, and we are also wondering what kind of obstacles, just like you mentioned, the religion is so tough. Okay, the religion, the power is so powerful in your country. How can you face all of the backlash or all of the criticism at that time? And now we have another two students who has got ready for their question. How about Chong Wei? Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Xu, and greetings, Professor Mary Robinson. And first and foremost, I must say that it is an honor to be sitting here with the one and only Mary Robinson. And so for my question, I would like to say, we all know that every career comes with its unique challenges, but being the president must have presented its own set of extraordinary difficulties. And as the first female president of Ireland, as well as someone who didn't follow any predecessor's path, I imagine you had to make many tough decisions. So, therefore, looking back on your presidential term, was there a specific decision that you made that in hindsight you believe could have been handled differently?
Oh, I must say, that's a very clever question, Chun-Wei. Of course, very clever question, thank you. Yes, probably there were more than one, but there was one in particular. It was about being under pressure once. Well, let me explain. The term of president in Ireland is 7 years, but you can also go forward for a second 7 years. And I was a popular president, I admit, at that stage, very popular, and I could have gone forward, but I decided not to because I felt I have worked to open up the presidency to show that a president of Ireland, even though you're not an executive political president, if you're elected by the people, then you can be relevant at local level, at national level, and at international level. And I felt, and my husband felt this very strongly, let somebody else now build on this and take it forward. So I decided not to seek a second term. It surprised everybody very much. And so what was I going to do? And then just after I had made this decision, the first High Commissioner, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, resigned suddenly and went back to his country, Ecuador, to be foreign minister because the job was too difficult. He didn't like the UN job. I was interested in human rights, so I asked the Irish government to put me forward to Kofi Annan, the Secretary General, and the UN. And the Irish government did a big effort to engage because there were other possible candidates. And then Kofi Annan chose me to be the new High Commissioner. But he chose me saying, we have not had a High Commissioner since the first one left and went home. We need you. Come early. And I should have said, no, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry, Secretary General. You have to wait for me. If you want me, you must wait until I have finished my full term as president. But I was afraid he wouldn't give me the job. I was afraid he might say, oh, no, it's urgent. I find somebody else. And I didn't think I had any other choice. You know, there was no other job that I could see. So I decided I would resign before the end of my term. So I became, I resigned from being president and became the new High Commissioner for Human Rights on the one day, the 12th of September of 1997, whereas my term would have ended on the 3rd of December. So there were 2.5 months. And I didn't appreciate at the time, but it became evident. The Irish people were really very upset that I did not serve out the full term. And in fact, it became very evident that they felt I was somehow almost using the presidency to get a better job. Little did they know that the job of High Commissioner was the most difficult job I have ever done. And so much so that it nearly broke my health after a few months because it was so hard. But that's another story. But it was a mistake that I admit very publicly now, that I didn't serve out my full term since I had been elected by the people for that 7 years. And so, very good question.
Okay, Dr. Mary Robinson, so do you regret having made that kind of decision now when you think about, when you think back?
Well, I'm glad that I have opportunities to make it clear that it was a mistake, because I think it's really important that people in positions of power can admit that they make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And we should actually, think of the climate and nature crisis. My generation failed. We made no adequate progress, and you are all suffering anxiety because we have not addressed the climate and nature problem. So as elders, we quite often, when we are talking to young people, begin by saying, we want to make it clear, we failed. We did not do what we should have done. And it's important to say this, especially because it's true. And young people need to know that other generations have failed to meet their responsibilities.
Thank you so much. I think life is a process of making different kind of choices, and we need to meet a lot of dilemmas, Yes. Yeah, just like the younger generation, I think they also need to face a lot of dilemmas over whether, what kind of study they need to major, which career path they need to go. And maybe they will think about, okay, because there's so many uncertainty in the future, so I think this is kind of like part of our life. Maybe this is part of our life. We make a lot of choices in our life. Thank you so much. And now we have another question about your presidency experiences, and it will be raised by Ziyuan. Ziyuan.
Thank you, Mr. Xu, and greetings, Professor Mary Robinson. I've made some research about Ireland itself, and I found out it is abundant of cultural heritage, and I also found out that Ireland is predominantly Catholics, as you have mentioned. And Catholicism tends to be more like a slightly bit conservative regarding to a role of women in the family. So, however, during your presidency, you have been dedicated into advancing women's rights. not only aspiring and showing women to present their leadership skills, but also at the same time advocate for women's equal rights in participating in different occupations without the limitation of gender stereotypes, and thus increasing women's visibility in the worldwide. So with the above mentioned, what kind of challenges do you encounter during your presidency due to the differing views with the Catholics?
Well, thank you, Yuan. If I may, I think I have to answer that question by saying I had a much bigger involvement with women's rights before I became president, which helped me with the presidency. I'll explain. So I realized as a lawyer that there were many laws discriminating against women. And because I was already a senator and a professor of law, but a part-time, it was a professorship, but the salary was very low. It was a part-time, it was for somebody who would be practicing as a lawyer. So a senator and professor, it meant that in my law practice, I didn't have to take all cases. I was able to specialize, if possible, in cases that were constitutional, cases that would make a difference. So I was lucky. And a lot of those cases involved women's rights. So I took a case where women were discriminated in not being barred from jury service, serving in juries and courts. It was men who were the jury panel, and women could not get on the jury panel. And we succeeded in challenging that under the Constitution. I took many cases about equal pay for women. I took cases for equal opportunity. And when we didn't succeed in the Irish court, we had two courts we might go to. One was the Court of the European Union in Luxembourg, and that was the one for equal pay, equal opportunity. I took several cases, and we won each one. That was good. And then on other cases, like access to legal aid for a poor woman who wanted to get, not a divorce, we had no divorce in Ireland at the time, but to get a judicial separation from a husband who was beating her. And she had to go into the High Court. No lawyer would help her because she was poor. So she took a case herself to the court in Strasbourg of human rights. And I became the lawyer for her, and we succeeded that she was entitled under the Convention on Human Rights, under the family law provisions of the Convention, to have access to a lawyer paid by the state, civil legal aid, very important case. Now, the reason I mention this is I had a reputation the year before I was nominated to be president as a lawyer, as a liberal, trying to change Irish law through cases in court and through my work as a senator. But I had actually retired from the Senate in August of 1969. And then I was nominated in March, April 1990, some months later. When I was nominated, the prediction was that I had a 100-to-1 chance of being elected, complete outsider, because my reputation was a lawyer, a human rights person, a liberal, not the traditional candidate for president. I ran a very long campaign with a lot of support from people, and especially women, I think, and then I got elected. And I'm trying to show you that because of the fact that I had this reputation, it was so new that Ireland would elect somebody like me. That is what was the difference. So when people say that I changed Ireland, I didn't change Ireland so much as give Ireland a recognition of how it was changing. Do you understand? You know, my election was almost symbolic of the changes that were happening, and I personified them because I had been so involved in taking cases, in speaking in the Senate, and doing. So they saw me, you know, and then it was easier as president to fulfill that. You know, as I said in the answer to a previous question, I really felt very strongly that I would be a better president of Ireland because I was a woman, because I knew exactly what I was going to try to do, and I knew how I was going to try to do it, because I had worked out what I would try to do. And you know, I think in many ways, at the stage of when I became president, it simply crystallized the work I had been doing. It made it clearer that Ireland had moved and was moving in a much more open way and much, much better for women. So.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. So you set a good example for all the women in Ireland. Yeah, just like I'm not quite sure if it is correct to say that. I think religion somehow, in a sense, it will make people suffocated because we have to follow a lot of religious doctrines. We need to follow a lot of norms set by religions, and we cannot say no. And it is hard to imagine that last century in your country, we have a lot of women abuse, just like in Taiwan, and women cannot conduct the practice of contraception. It is hard to imagine that, but you are the pioneer. I think being a pioneer, especially women, is quite important if you want to do some changes. Even though we cannot do any changes, 100% changes, but we need to take the initiative. I think this is the message that you want to spread to all of us. Thank you, Dr. Yeah, thank you, Doctor. Yeah, and now we will move on to another issue. How about our environmental sustainability? And we got Ricky. He got another question. Yeah, Ricky.
By the way, I compliment all four of you on your English. Woo, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Xu. Professor Robinson, in 2012, you mentioned two primary issues in climate change, being the media not reporting sufficiently enough on the urgency of the issue, and the politicians not having to make decisions that we need to take. After more than a decade, did you feel like the issue has been resolved, or do you think there's anything we need to improve? Thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. Sadly, I do not think the situation has changed enough. The truth is that scientists, climate and nature scientists are telling us not only is the situation very urgent, but it's getting more urgent, more quickly than they had thought. That is what the science is saying. I happen to be very close to a lot of climate scientists. I have a very, how would I say, a very impressive new hat that I wear. I don't wear hats, but title. I am a guardian of the planetary boundaries. There are 9 planetary boundaries that scientists have identified, which goes beyond just climate change. And they are fresh water, oceans being acidification of the oceans, the ozone layer, you know, which all of the processes that keep us, keep the system of the world working. And in those 9 processes, we are in breach. We are getting into the red in 6 of them. Imagine. But the good news is we were in very serious trouble on one of them, the ozone layer, in the 1980s. And the ozone layer, I remember this very well, was opening up. And this would mean that people would just burn, fry. And we were very frightened. And we realized the chemicals that were doing this, and quickly we got the Montreal Protocol, got rid of the chemicals, and the world was safe. And now the ozone layer is not in trouble. So that shows that we can reverse the trend. But of course, the broader trends are more complicated. The climate and nature crisis and the other boundaries are quite complicated. So on the first point, the urgency, it is even more urgent, and we don't get this sense from the media or from politicians enough. And then politicians, on the whole, you know, the leadership has improved. when I was the special envoy of the UN Secretary General before the Paris Agreement in 2015, which was a very important agreement, as you would know, the world was heading for 4 degrees Celsius warming, 4 degrees. Now it's heading probably from somewhere between 2.4 degrees and 2.7 degrees Celsius. That is disastrous. But it's less disastrous than 4 degrees, you know. So what we need and what the Paris Agreement agreed to is to stay at 1.5 degrees. That is the top. Let's not go up to 2 degrees. Why? Because between 1.5 and 2 degrees, what the scientists say basically is that the coral reefs would probably disappear. Now, I say probably because the scientists never say definitely. The scientists are always aware, you can't totally predict. So probably the coral reefs would disappear between 1.5 and a permanent 2 degrees. Probably the Arctic ice would melt. Probably the permafrost, which throws up not just carbon, but methane, which is even more lethal in the short term. So this is why the risks are very great. And we should be seeing the countries like my country in Ireland and Europe, like the United States, like Korea, like, frankly, Taiwan. We built our economies on fossil fuel. We should be moving much more rapidly to reduce and go to the renewable energy future, which is a great future, a very positive future. And we should be helping developing countries to leapfrog into that future, not to go through fossil fuel, but to, we know what we need to do. It is doable completely. It is completely possible to get to this much better world that is healthier, that is circular economy, no waste, lots of green jobs. It's very possible. It just needs 2 words: political will. And the political will is not there. So I give you a slightly long answer, Ricky, because this is my passion.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mary Robinson. It's just like you say, political will plays an important role in solving this problem. But do you think the United States, the strongest country in the world, or China, do they have the motivation to solve or to take the social, to take environmental issue or climate change seriously?
In a way, I'm generalizing, but in a way, both China and the United States are doing something significant. In the case of China, it's moving into the renewable energy, on solar, on wind, on electric vehicles. I mean, they are the world leader, so they have moved. But they have also moved even more into coal, and so they have not fully met their responsibility on emissions. In the United States, under President Biden, you have the Inflation Reduction Act, which is incentivizing moving into green energy, green jobs, etc. And that is positive, and it is working. But they are not cutting down on fossil fuel. They are increasing, in fact. And also, they are not contributing as much as they should to the climate finance, which would help developing countries. Their Congress is very bad at supporting developing countries with aid, with support. So, what is good about the climate discussion is that the United States representatives, the special envoys of the United States and of China, are able to talk to each other much more than in other areas, which is very, very important, that they work together more closely on the climate and nature crisis than on other crises. And hopefully, because this next year with COP30 in Brazil will be a very important COP when all countries are supposed to increase their ambition, and hopefully China and the United States, among other countries, will increase their ambition.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I have another question. Yeah, I'm thinking about, the developing countries like Africa, most African countries, they're victimized by climate change. Yeah, so besides offering them some financial aid, what else can we do? Because, some African countries, children or the next generation, they have no access to the internet at all. They know nothing about the outside world, but they are the victims of climate change. So what can we do our part to help them?
Yeah, again, it's a very good question, and I think about that a lot. That's why I talk about climate justice, because I think we have to recognize the injustices of the climate and nature crisis, the kind of different layers of injustice. The first injustice is that the climate and nature crisis has affected much earlier and disproportionately the poorest countries, the poorest communities, the small island developing states, and the indigenous peoples, much earlier and much more severely than more developed countries. Secondly, women are deeply affected, much more, by the climate impacts, whether it's heat, whether it's flooding, whether it's drought, etc. And yet they are also trying to make their communities resilient. They work very hard to make their communities resilient, but they don't get the climate finance. It doesn't get to the grassroots. And then you have the intergenerational injustice that I already mentioned, that young people, young climate activists, are becoming more and more anxious because they have been campaigning for change, and the change is not happening enough. And they're, feeling we're trying so hard. We're not making the decisions. We're not there at the table, and they won't do it. And they're pushing hard, and then there's also the injustice to future generations not yet born. What kind of world will they have if we don't move, if we don't change? And then there is the injustice to nature, which I'm increasingly worried about. What we are doing to nature, the loss of biodiversity, the extinction of species. The loss of species in our world is very, very worrying. So I think we would have a better approach if we were more people-centered about the whole climate issue. It's not a matter of science and technology. It's about people and how people are affected and what policies we're going to have to protect them. And the people who most need protection from the impacts of climate are developing countries, and they most need, as you said, access to the new technologies. I was at a summit in Paris in May about clean cooking in Africa, a summit of some heads of state and commissioners and politicians, etc. And the conclusion was that it would require $4 billion a year over 6 years to provide the 900 million women in Africa with clean cooking. And then everybody kind of went home. We didn't see 4 billion produced. So, and I have this strong sense it would make a huge difference, not just to the lives of the women who have to get up at 5 in the morning to go out long distance to get the water, long distance to get the wood for the fire, for the dirty cooking, or the charcoal or animal dung, whatever it is, and the drudgery, the burden of the lifestyle. If that could be changed, if the 600 million who never switch the switch for electricity, as you said, if they could get the electricity, young people can do their homework, clinics will have safe birth, maternity birth, everything would change. And this is why I want us to really seek this better world, because for the developing world in particular, it will make such a difference. And it does not cost too much money. I mean, $4 billion, yes, it's quite a lot of money. But when you think of the money that's spent on armaments, the money that's spent on waste, the money, probably more money is spent on perfume, every year than 4 billion. So, come on.
Thank you so much for your insight into this issue. I think maybe conscience should be prioritized. If we prioritize financial incentive over our conscience, maybe this problem may not be solved. Thank you so much, Dr. Robinson. Let's move on to another question. We have another question raised by Lydia. Yeah, Lydia, here you go.
Thank you, Teacher Shi. Greetings, Dr. Robinson. The question of how to balance economic development and environmental sustainability has always been a crucial subject matter in the global community. Reaching progress in one area often seems to come at the cost of the other. In light of your past experience in advocating environmental sustainability, what is your call on the balance between environmental sustainability and economic development? And what do you think will be the challenges when we are reaching a win-win situation within both? Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia. I mean, that's a very important question, and you're right. There's a lot of debate about it, and there's a lot of attempt to say, if we try to move to this green economy, it's too costly, we're not able to do it. Farmers object to changing the methods of farming. Yeah, everybody, there's pushback, particularly at the moment. We've seen more pushback in recent years. But actually, the problem is that we're spending money in the wrong way. By that I mean, I belong to a group of business leaders called the B team of business leaders, and they are heads of some of the biggest companies in the world. I'm not a businesswoman. I think, as you say, I'm the moral conscience, But what they have estimated is that the world spends every year about $1.8 trillion on what is harming the world. About $1.8 trillion on what is harming the world. What is this harming the world? Fossil fuel and bad land management. So if subsidies for fossil fuel, so if we could change those subsidies to incentives for clean energy, then it could become very quickly affordable and accessible. Green jobs would become very possible. We would cut out waste. We would, do all the things that need to be done. We would be much healthier because we would not have the pollution that kills so many people. Switching the money is really very important. And then the other money that is talked about is the money that is spent stopping us from thinking clearly about this issue. And that is a communications campaign of the fossil fuel lobby. They spend about $4 billion a year, according to Al Gore, and I think he has done his homework. He knows what he's talking about in this. $4 billion a year on misrepresentation, on saying you can't tackle poverty if you try to get rid of fossil fuel, et cetera, et cetera. And so it makes it difficult to see clearly, because there's so much misrepresentation, so much money spent in different ways, trying to misquote the facts, misquote the reality, play down, deny the science, muddy the science, pay people to do bad science. It's a very difficult world at the moment because it's not straightforward. There are two competing issues, and we need to move very rapidly, and we're held back by the money that's spent in the wrong way, as I said, and by the communications budget that's spent making it more difficult to see clearly and making it harder. So I sometimes describe myself as an angry granny, I don't like all of this. We shouldn't have this, We should be clear about where we're going and why we want to go there.
Thank you so much. So we know this is important to use our budget and money properly, otherwise it will be waste, right? Sorry? So it is important for us to use our budget and money properly, otherwise it will be waste, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. And now we have, because of the time constraint, now we have to move on to the last session. prospect of our future generation. And we have two students who has got ready for their question. How about Chong Wei?
Thank you, Mr. Xu. Excuse me. And for this question, I would like to address the major issue of our younger generation. And so nowadays, the younger generation has to contend with like unprecedented challenges, and with anxiety being a major issue. Statistics shows that over 1/3 of students in general struggle with anxiety, even though they may not acknowledge it themselves. And with the rapid advancements of like technology, the future has become more erratic and often changing than before, and leaving the younger generation feeling more intimidated every day. And so my question is that, based on your experiences and the hardships that you've overcome, is there a particular life lesson or a belief that you hold very dear during your challenging times, and you believe that this will be an incentive to motivate the younger generation during their challenging times?
Yeah, that's a really good question, I must say, Chan Wei. I do see a lot of anxiety among young people and among young climate activists, as I mentioned earlier, because they try so hard and they're not seeing results. And there is a lot of real change happening in our world. It's complex, and I think that troubles young people. What the elders have been doing, the elders that I am chair of, and we're very old, what we have been doing is having deep conversations with a lot of young people. And the interesting thing is, we learn as much as we hope we also contribute. You know, what we learn is the perspective of a young person. As you said, the fact that this is a complex, difficult world. And we learn more and more that young people want to be at the decision table. They want to have more opportunity to contribute. And one way in which I think young people can be less anxious, for example, about the climate problem, is by becoming involved in learning more about it and becoming actively advocating for moving towards this better world of renewable energy and no waste and circular economy, etc., and good recycling, which I see here in Taiwan. I have to say, I admit, I am very impressed by the way you are recycling here in Taiwan. You are better than Ireland. We have to learn this lesson. So, you know, becoming active helps anxiety. But more than that, I think young people are making the case, and the elders are supporting that case, that there should actually be more young people at the deciding table. And I'm talking about young people in their 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s. You know, everybody's young to me now, but that's the young people I'm talking about, that they should be at the table. And in New York, which I've just come from, where we had the UN discussions, they were talking about co-creation by young people in decision-making. And actually, it's there, the commitment to more involvement of young people in decision-making is in the Pact for the Future, which was adopted, which has lots of hooks that young people can use. And I actually found that the young people we met in New York in our discussions just last week were more excited about being recognized at last as being potential, you know, real deciders, that they have to have that possibility. And I think, you know, we have a very young world. The majority world is very, very young and must be able to be at the table and to help with decision making. So I hope that that will help with the anxiety of young people that you referred to, and maybe the mental health issues that some young people have, that actually young people need to feel more empowered to be at the table. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mary Robinson. Maybe I can give you some more details about the anxiety of our younger generation in Taiwan. I'm curious about the anxiety of those Irish young people. Maybe if you are interested, you can tell me more. In Taiwan, personally, I think the anxiety may be ascribed to poor pay. This is the first anxiety. And the second one is that maybe education has been monopolized. Education is not the way that people that can create a social mobility anymore in Taiwan, because education has been monopolized by the rich in Taiwan. In a sense, this is my personal bias, maybe. Yeah, so that's why a lot of younger generations, they have a lot of confusion. They don't know where they can go. They don't know. Okay. No matter how hard they try, they find no future. They find no prospect in their future, and that's why this is one of the reasons why they may feel anxious. How about in Ireland?
Yeah, I think what young people feel in Ireland is there is an inequality that has driven up house prices, and it's very hard for young people to get housing. That is one of the major issues in Ireland today, and politicians are full of talk about it, but it's not. And I think throughout our world, to be honest, we have far too much inequality, both between countries and within countries, far too much, and it means that I came back to our talk about leadership with Ricky. Leadership is about service to your people. It's about thinking about what will make them feel better, and all too often that's not the priority. The priority is, decisions being taken for selfish reasons or accumulated capital in small, large companies. I mean, some companies now are much bigger than countries, much more powerful, and much more powerful in our world. It's not good, and I know that this is something that. I hope won't alienate the boys in the thing, but I think profoundly myself that we would have a better world with less of this division, less of this discrimination, less of this, if it was a balanced world. If in every government you had 50% women, in every cabinet you had 50%, in every parliament, in every corporation board, in every trade union, whatever, in other words, if we had true equality. I saw the way you illustrated rule of law with the graphics earlier, that we're all equal. But we know that's not as true as it should be. That's the way it should be, but it's not the way it is. In particular, if we had the more gender balance, I say that because I'm very involved in what we call the women's movement, and the way the women's movement takes decisions. And it's kind of cooperative, it's listening, it's non-hierarchical, everybody is entitled to speak and listen to, and then it's problem solving, it's practical. It tries to actually, get to the heart of how to solve the problem. And it's not too much about people's ego as much as, solving the problem for the good of everybody. And I think we need more of that leadership at every level. And we don't have enough of it because women are not there at enough levels. So.
Thank you so much. And now, thank you so much. And now we will move on to the last question raised by Zhiyuan.
Thank you, Mr. Xu. And Professor Mary Robinson, it is my honor to make the last ask you the last question to make this Q&A session and the ending of this Q&A session. So upon all your promotions that you have made on human rights, there must be some achievements that haven't yet met with your expectations, like what you have just mentioned about gender equality, the definition of true gender equality. So what is the most significant proposal you have advocated in your career regarding the action of emphasizing the importance of gender equality, and how do you think we can enhance it in the future?
Well, thank you, Yuan, for that question. Let me think about it. You see, there are so many different ways we try to advance women's rights, gender equality, but also, as I said, that balance in societies. And maybe because it's so much my passion now, I'll tell you about what I'm trying to do at the global level in a women-led way, okay? Do you see this dandelion that I'm wearing? Okay, can you see it? And actually, no, he's not wearing it at the moment. My husband often wears one as well. But this is an initiative for a women-led climate justice movement in the world. Women-led, but not women only. When we say women-led, we have initiated that we actually need a bottom-up swell of pressure in order to move more quickly to this better world and to be true to the science. So what we see is, as I mentioned, on the side of misrepresentation, you have a huge budget and good communications. They know what they're doing. They're trying to deny the science, they're trying to muddy it, they're trying to... But on the side of the many millions of people who are trying to move us forward in the right direction, we're not connected. So we feel that we need a symbol to help us to connect. And it's like, it's not an organization. It's more like a human ecosystem where we take this dandelion. Why the dandelion? Because it grows on all continents. It's very resilient. You can't get rid of this if you want to. And you know, I grew up thinking it was a weed and wanting to get rid of it. Now I think it's a beautiful flower, but it is very resilient. It will come back. It will grow in cracks. It will, you know, it's a very strong, and then because it has deep roots, it is regenerative of the soil. So farmers should actually welcome the dandelion. It helps with the soil. You can eat or drink every part of the dandelion in soups, in teas, in wine, etc. And people do. And it even has some medical properties that I won't go into in detail because I don't even understand them myself. It's a wonder. And how do you spread it? You just blow the seed. So we feel we need a nature symbol because we are nature, but we're becoming too divorced from nature. And we need to regroup with nature and be part of nature. So the dandelion is the symbol. What do we want to do? We want to unite the work that indigenous peoples do, including here in Taiwan. I've been learning about your indigenous tribes, preserving the forests, preserving the seeds. You know, indigenous peoples do very good work all over the world. And they have great wisdom, and they are part of nature in a very natural, very deep way. Young people, you know, young climate activists who are urging us to move faster. Business people who are on the right side, and there are many. I mentioned the B team of business leaders. They talk the same language as me. They are exactly as concerned as I am about the, scientists, farmers, fishers, artists, students. If we can, grow our sense of connection, grow our sense of communication, begin to message in the same way, and switch the money. Put the pressure to have more of the money go to grassroots building resilience, young people trying to get the green jobs, the kind of move from the way the world works at the moment to a much better way. I think this to me would be the game changer if we can, because I know what motivates democratic politicians. They want to be re-elected. So they don't want to do anything that will disturb the status quo almost. They need to learn that there is a yearning for this difference, a different world, a fairer, safer world where we will have no waste, where we will have a circular economy, where we'll have green jobs for everybody, where the change in the developing world will be phenomenal because they will have access to this clean energy. They need to feel the pressure of that in order to make decisions and make change. So I am working with an increasing group of going out now from women-led to many men also, including this B team of business leaders have joined. We have a wonderful group in India called the Self-Employed Women's Association. They are women who work in the informal sector at the lowest level in society, the lowest income level. And because they organize, they help themselves. They have done incredible work helping with garment workers, waste pickers, women in construction, etc. And they now are part of Project Dandelion. And we have faith-based, different multi-faith groups. I was in Brasilia recently for a G20 multi-faith group, and we talked about Project Dandelion because faith groups are close to people on the ground of the many, many faiths. And they also very often feel that they are stewards of the earth and that, you know, they want to, I mean, from a Catholic point of view, the Pope has spoken very well on climate. He's given good leadership on it, and other religious leaders have also done so. So we want to make this connection, not by trying to have an organization, as I said, but let the dandelion's magic make us more powerful, grow our power, because we are connected. It's as simple as that.
Thank you so much. I think it seems that we live in a world of chaos. Okay, so because we have more and more natural disaster over the past 30 years, probably because of the climate change. But there's still a silver lining, because we, just like Dr. Robinson mentioned, we still have a lot of people making a lot of contribution to making this world much better. And I think this is one of the important messages that the younger generation should be bear in mind. We need to do our part. We need to do everything according to our conscience and morality. I think this is the point. Even though we cannot do a lot, but actually, if we don't do anything, then actually nothing will happen. And then just like in the Holy Bible, apocalypse, we will be waiting for the end of our world. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Robinson. And this is all of the questions that the 4 students will raise here. And now it is our Q&A question. Do you want to invite some students, or we want to choose students to ask questions, or is there anyone who want to raise any question? You have to raise your hand. Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
How about this gentleman? This one. Yeah. This gentleman. Yeah.
Greetings, Ms. Robinson. I was really fascinated by your career in the United Nations, and I want to inquire your views regarding the link between climate change, the severe impacts of climate change, and the international security. And what are some potential risks of human rights violations, and what can we do to improve it? Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. I just want to make sure that I fully understood. You're saying, what are the risks of moving to clean energy, to human rights?
What are the risks of human rights violations regarding climate change impacts?
Yes, okay. Well, the truth is, and indeed, you know, this has increasingly been recognized by courts, that the climate and nature crisis is undermining human rights, is, you know, ceasing, it means that governments are not protecting human rights. Let me give you a very important case example, which I like very much, because it's a case that in Switzerland, grannies like me, older women, took an action against Switzerland, that Switzerland was becoming hotter, and because they were older, they were being affected by this heat, and Switzerland was not doing enough in its climate policy to protect. And they won a very important decision this year in the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. And many courts now in different parts of the world are finding that their countries are not moving fast enough. It happened in Ireland, it happened in France, it happened in lots of countries, successful cases that the government is not going fast enough to protect human rights, to protect their people. So that's exactly what is already beginning to happen. And there are cases also against big oil and gas companies and coal companies. Some of those cases are still, working their way, but some have succeeded. There is another point that I wanted to make, which is a more complex point. We also have to be careful when we have clean energy coming, that there is respect for human rights. And there are examples of mega projects of hydrogen or mega projects of solar energy, for example, or wind farm, major wind, which do not respect the land rights of ordinary people below, maybe indigenous people, or, and there are examples of just not regarding, just like the mining companies of the fossil fuel era. When you have mega projects, mistakes can be made that are also violating human rights. So, but I have to say, I am encouraged by the number of court cases all around the world that are taking place now, courts protecting people against violation of their human rights. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much. Do we have another volunteer? Any? Okay, maybe this gentleman.
Thank you, Professor, for the amazing talk. I believe we all learned so much from it. Personally, myself, I've read about you and so many other environmental activists before, and it influenced me a lot. So I might look a little sunburned today because just this past week, I organized a beach clean recently, and I also plan to study environmental protection in the future. So I got a couple of questions here. The first one is that I believe the future will be inevitable that we will be developing artificial intelligence. However, both the development of the technology as well as the usage cause a lot of energy as well as produce a lot of pollution. So how do you think that human can balance the development of technology as well as the protection of the environment?
I think that's a very good question, a very important question, a very relevant question, because this is really what is happening now. There is no doubt that artificial intelligence has great potential for helping in so many ways, helping research, helping innovation, helping accelerate in health and other areas, good things. But there is also a worry about artificial intelligence becoming in control in a way that may replace humans in a very dangerous way, particularly when you think of nuclear weapons, etc. And then there is the point that you made, if I understood, I think quite accurately. Artificial intelligence is absorbing a lot of energy. It is using a lot of the energy. And that is not at the moment taken into account because it is very large corporations with a lot of money, a lot of investment who are doing this. So they're just, taking the energy and using it in a way that may not be good for the world. So I think we have to be vigilant about the elders that I lead that were brought together by Nelson Mandela. We have made serious statements about the need for global governance, meaning, in effect, UN regulation of artificial intelligence. Because at the moment, the United States is doing some regulating, China is doing some regulating, the European Union is doing some regulating, but that doesn't work because there are gaps in between, and it doesn't give a security for the world. So we need a UN regulation. Now, the good news is that in the Pact for the Future that has just been adopted, there is a digital compact that includes the beginnings of working for global governance of AI. And I think that is really, really important for lots of reasons that your question raises. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Did you say you have a second question?
Oh, yeah, okay, if that's okay. So you've talked about how the US, China, and other more developed countries are focusing on building a sustainable future. However, there are still a lot of developing countries that probably value development more than the planet. So how do you think that, and also like these countries are sometimes like they have the most important habitats in them, such as like Indonesia and Congo and Brazil. So how do you think that these bigger countries will be able to help these developing countries to protect the environment while they can still get the benefit from like those undeveloped lands?
Yeah. Again, I think that's a very important, relevant question to, the politics at the moment of climate change, because a significant number of developing countries have found their own coal, oil, and gas in different ways. And they say, why can't we fully develop like you did, like developed countries did, our oil and gas, and make us more prosperous? And it's a very sort of real question in the world today. But the reality is, you go back to the injustice. The injustice is, as I mentioned, that the climate impacts are worse and come much earlier for the poorest countries, poorest communities, etc. So for the countries that have not developed and have not built their resilience. So if they fully exploit, they will be the first to be affected. Even there are studies that show that it is unlikely that they will compete with the parts of the world like Saudi Arabia and the United States and China that already have sophisticated production. So they will be the last to use fossil fuel. And the danger is that developing countries that try to move now and build an infrastructure, by the time they do it, that it will have become stranded assets. When I first heard that expression, stranded assets, I said, I don't understand. What does this mean? And the person who used the expression said, think of asbestos. Do you know asbestos in buildings? It's very bad material that is very harmful. It was used in a lot of buildings 100 years ago or so. But if now there's a building with asbestos, builders need special equipment to deal with the problems and remove the asbestos. And so this is the meaning of stranded asset. You cannot use it because it's too dangerous. And that is what may happen. So we do recognize that there needs to be some leeway for developing countries that have, that the real point is that the developed world that built its economy on fossil fuel, the richer parts of the world, they must move fastest. They must get out of fossil fuel fastest. But it is not to be encouraged that developing countries go the fossil fuel way, because there's all the danger of stranded assets. They will also be making worse the climate shocks that affect them worse. And clean energy is the way to go. But in order to have the clean energy, they need the investment. And that is the problem. I was very aware in discussions in New York, I took part in some discussions about Africa. Africa got less than 2% of investment in clean energy last year. You know, the investment globally in clean energy, less than 2% for Africa. Africa has incredible solar potential, incredible rare earth potential, no investment. You know, so, we still have not got a fair world.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Two very good questions, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions? Okay, so we have another gentleman.
Hey, come on, you young girl students. I expect at least one from a girl student, eh?
Greetings, Professor Robinson. And first of all, I would like to thank you for visiting the small country with beautiful citizens. And actually, the question following is not so related to the climate crisis, but it's I think it's related to the contents you just mentioned. And so as participants in the local and central government, actually mostly advocate in this UNCRC, I think that we face the same questions on both human rights and children's rights. And mostly in the government participation, I think that one problem is that actually mostly for students, high school students, so the definition, and we're youth and students. Yeah, sorry, my mind just went blank. And actually, the students in Taiwan, mostly high school students, we don't really get into the issues like climate crisis or the human rights, children's rights, student rights. And so my question is, how is it possible for students to get into the issues, to promote the participations in those issues? Thank you.
Thank you. It's an interesting question because obviously this is my first visit to Taiwan, but I do come from a small country, so I'm a great believer in small countries. So I'm not quite sure, what the what the kind of motivations of young people in this country is. I'm very interested. Your questions are very good on the panel and from the floor. I think there is a need for young people to engage in the issues that preoccupy the world, because it's, as we said earlier, it's a troubled world, if you engage with it, you're less likely to have the sort of anxiety, mental health problem, because you're actually trying to do something. And let me put this in the context of how the elders often talk about it. We often talk about, in fact, Nelson Mandela, when he brought us together, he said, whatever else you do, you must be humble, you must listen to people, you must, be aware that you don't have all the answers, but whatever else you do, you must bring hope. And why did he say that? Because hope is so important. And hope is something, the glass, here it's the bottle, may not be half full. You see, it's about a third full. But what you do is you work with what's there. And the first chair of the elders was Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa. He was a wonderful person who got the Nobel Peace Prize for his work for his people, fighting apartheid, fighting discrimination at a very basic level, being very brave about it. And I was on a panel with him in New York about, it must be 15 years ago now, with young people. So the two of us were speaking to young people. And when Archbishop Tutu is speaking to young people, he expresses his love of them, he waves his arms, and he was full of, I believe you, I love you, all this. And we were being moderated by a woman journalist. And unlike this excellent moderator here, who has never said anything sharply, she said very sharply, Archbishop Tutu, why are you such an optimist? And he looked at her gently, and he said, oh no, he said, I am not an optimist, I am a prisoner of hope. And I thought that was a wonderful expression, because what he was saying is, I have lived through very difficult times in my own country, and I know the difficulties around the world, but I know that people struggle. They work with the glass not being half full or even less than that, but they work to make a difference. They make a difference in their family, make a difference in their community, make a difference. And that's what we need in life, is to have that sense of, you take the situation, it may not be the best situation, you work to make it a bit better, step by step, point by point, and you have the courage to continue to do that. And that is very much what Nelson Mandela was telling us. We must bring to all discussions and to the world. We must all be prisoners of hope. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any ladies or other students from other school who want to raise question? Anyone? Okay, maybe we'll have another gentleman again. Yeah, this one.
Thank you, thank you. And my question is, we as a high school student, and what are the things we can do to make some difference in our world? Because most of our student is indifferent to like climate change. All of our time are spent on mobile phones and video games. So like if we can have a prize or a fun way to make some impact, so what are the ways to make some difference in the world? Or what are the one thing we can do to help our future?
Yeah. Well, one thing I do know about young people is that they know an awful lot more about social media than I do. They are connected, you are connected with your phone, you have all the, you have a circle of friends, you have a wider circle, you Google, you look at, so you are connected. So connect with these issues, you know, be part of a kind of voice on these issues. And I think, you know, when with my fellow elders, most of us are not on social media. I don't have big following on social media because I didn't grow up like you, knowing, you know, I'm better than my husband, I have to say, good deal better than him, but I'm still an elder. I go slowly, I lose the thing, you know, whereas you all, you know, you just are so good and that's important. It's important to have that connection. I know that there can be a dark side of it. I know there can be bullying. When I said, you know, that I had my problems when I put forward that legislation on family planning in 1971-72 in Ireland, there was no social media, but even getting letters through the post is very hurtful. But when you get a constant barrage of social media, it's awful, I know. So we need to, you know, push back altogether. And unfortunately, it's worse for girls, worse for young women. The misogyny, the way in which social media can be nasty is not good. But there is a power to connect, and I think that's how young people's voices can be heard, by, you know, working together in a positive way of seeking the kind of change that you want to see in society. So I'd very much encourage that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have one more. Any ladies or? Okay. We have. Oh, okay. This lady, please. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello, Professor Robinson. It's my honor to speak here. And I'm from the Taipei First Girls High School. As a female student in Taiwan, even we've been taught that girls can do the same thing as boys, but there's still lots of problems that I face when I'm in school. For example, I'm from the science class, and there's as I see, there's a high sex ratio of many science and math competition that makes the girls feel a little bit, how can I say, and we're a little bit afraid to try these things, such as the math and science. And what do you think about this, and how can we change this situation? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. Thank you for having the courage to stand up and ask that question. That's good. I'm going to surprise you, maybe. And this is advice for all the young female students here. I wish somebody had given me that advice more when I was your age. First of all, I often say, and it's very true, when I was your age, I was very shy, very, very shy. I would have hated to stand up like you've done in the middle of. I had to force myself to debate. And then when I went to university, I would take part in a debate and I would go completely blank. You know, just psychologically, my brain would go dead. And I would blush and I would be so embarrassed. But I decided I have to make this happen. I want my ideas to go across. So I worked very hard, and then I became better. And then I won debating competitions, you know, which was very good. what I didn't, what I wasn't told at the time was it can be very useful sometimes to use humor, to actually be relaxed enough to tell a funny story or share a joke. And if you think about it, young boys do that much more than young girls. You may not have thought about that, but they do. Young boys are relaxed, they laugh, they joke. Young girls feel they have to try so hard, they have to be so serious about themselves that they don't kind of convey the confidence of humor. Now, my best teacher on humor was Archbishop Tutu. He taught me the importance of being able to make people laugh. What he would do is he would actually make himself a little bit ridiculous. He would put on a funny hat, or he would dance, and people would laugh. And he would enjoy, they would laugh with him and almost at him, both with him and about him. But they would laugh. And then he would make a serious point, and they would be listening because they had shared the laughter. Very, very important. Very, very interesting. We don't think about that enough. And certainly I don't think schools think about it enough. So because you've been brave enough to stand up and ask the question, I offer you this real advice. Think about how you can bring humor more into your answers, what you're saying, even pushing back on what annoys you. Don't always push back seriously. Sometimes push back by complete joke satire, because that's more effective sometimes. Just, how ridiculous you are, Okay, I hope that helps.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Are there any other brave girls that that wants to raise any question? Maybe you can ask some questions about the difficulties of being a girl, whatever. Is there? We still have another two gentlemen. Okay, maybe this gentleman, please. Yeah, with the headphone.
Hi, everyone. I wonder what Mary Robinson thinks about the interaction between all human individuals, such as the supranational United Nations structure that you just mentioned. We know that cooperation is very important, but there are many individuals, small groups, large groups, national nations, countries, etc. In this world. So I'm curious about your opinion on how human beings should concede individual wishes, and how should we balance between the individual's wills to the really large goal of the society.
Okay, I hope I've understood you. I just had a little problem, but are you talking about the divides in our world because sort of geopolitical divides, or you mentioned individuals. Can you explain maybe again the question?
Okay, so my question is like, from the supranational United Nations structure that you just mentioned to every single individuals, that was a really, really big gap between all the wishes.
Yeah.
Then how should we balance? Because we know that cooperations are really important, but it is always a problem to fix. How should we balance between individuals to real large groups?
Yeah. Well, I take the point now, and I think if you look at the United Nations, what are the first three words of the United Nations Charter? We, the peoples. And then very quickly it gets into the importance of states. And actually, I don't think that has necessarily been a very good thing, because it has made the nationalism of states more important than the good of ordinary people, you know, we the peoples. But that's the way it was drawn up. And we, through human rights legislation, human rights treaties, we've managed to have states accept obligations, etc. But the current world is a difficult one because we are seeing political shifts that are very hard to gauge how far they will go, but it's no longer a world of only one or two powers. It's a world of different powers, a multipolar world, but it hasn't actually quite identified itself, and it's not reflected in the structures. For example, if you take the UN Security Council, it represents the power in 1945 at the end of the Second World War. Come on, you know, there are other countries that ought to be more important members of the Security Council to give a better balance in the world, and so on. So this is certainly true that you know, there's a need to address, and then a lot of the power is in the corporate world now, a power to leverage in a way that states don't even, you know, can't resist, and that's a problem. And then we were talking about artificial intelligence. You know, we absolutely need to have a global governance of that, cooperation, as you mentioned, for that global governance. That's hard to get at the moment. I mean, just to give you an illustration from my experience, I mean, I've obviously been aware of how the UN works for a long time, from my time, especially when I became High Commissioner in 1997, and then the other mandates. I have never before known of a summit of heads of state gathering and there being a vote because one of the heads of state objected, or one of the countries objected, and other countries, few countries supported the objection. Russia objected to adopting the Pact of the Future, which was a resolution. There had to be a vote. Actually, the vote was not initially on the pact, it was on a procedural motion because that could be done by majority voting. And an African state put forward a procedural motion not to put forward the Russian motion, to deny the Russians, put aside the Russian, and that was voted. So the Russian motion was put aside, and then the President of the General Assembly just asked, are there any objections? No, bang, and the gavel came down. So it was but the tension in the room, I mean, you know, and this was the first time that it had got to that stage, which just shows that there is a lot of, you know, discontent in our world today, a lot of nationalism, a lot of, you know, leaders who are not collaborating in the way that they should, or countries that are trying to divide through competition, or, you know, it is worrying. But I still, for all its, you know, inadequacies, if you like, the UN is still very important because it is where the smallest countries, except with the exception of your country, I know, can participate. Yeah.
Very thanks for your answer.
Okay, thank you so much. Because of time constraint, probably we have to wrap up our Q&A time here. Thank you for all of your thoughtful questions, and we have to extend a special appreciation to Dr. Mary Robinson. Today, she gave us a lot of insight into various kinds of questions. As a student, I think we have to be aware of the dangers ahead. We need to know what is so-called climate justice. Maybe I can share my story with you. I told my student last week I'm going to host a symposium, and my student asked me, what's that about? I said, climate justice. And he said, what? So actually, I think as an educator, we have the responsibility to give more access to our students, telling them the urgent issue of climate change or the human rights or even the gender equality. And I think the most important thing is that even though we live in a world of chaos, we have a lot of natural disaster, we have to cherish hope. Hope, I think, is the last thing that we can catch to make some changes in this world. And you need to pass this message to our next generation. And as for girls, for all the ladies here today, I think Dr. Robinson just set a very good model for all of you. Be brave and to be yourself. And I think all the ladies, if you find you're a little bit suffocated or even dominated in a male-dominated society, maybe we can use some humorous way to solve this kind of awkward situation. Yeah, but I think in Taiwan, the social status of female is very high. It's very high. Yeah, because in Taiwan is a very diverse country. We emphasize the importance of equality, either in education or gender. Yeah, so I think maybe our situation is not that. Is not the same with Ireland. Yeah, but it is quite nice to talk with you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay, so it is now we have. It is time for us to take a photo. Yeah, our 4 students they have prepared some souvenir for you. Yeah.
Right. That concludes our Q&A session. Thank you all for your innovative and interesting questions. Now, the representative students have a special gift prepared for Professor Mary Robinson. They prepared mascots of their schools to show their appreciation. First, will the panelists from Django High School present your gifts? The panelists from Taipei First Girls High School and Zhongshan Girls High School will present their gifts. Now, please remain in place while the panelists from Django High School join them for a group photo.